Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Salam alaikum.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mark Brackett, as you just heard, and this is my colleague Robin Stern. And our goal tonight really is to share with you what our center at Yale has been doing for about 25 years, and more recently sort of going to scale with teaching emotional intelligence. And of course, tonight's focus is going to be on the role of emotional intelligence in families. So we're going to do a little bit of a road show. Meaning that we're gonna go sort of back and forth, and tonight will be as interactive as much as we possibly can make it. So please don't think of yourselves as passive participants. Think of yourselves as collaborators in this process.
Before we jump into tonight's first activity, I just want to share with you that aside from my academic credentials, I'm also a mom. And my children, Scott and Melissa, are 26 and 24, respectively. And it's Melissa's love of this region and this country that initially ignited our passion in coming here. So I'm very grateful to her, and she's with me in my heart, as well as my son, Scott, who's wishing us all well tonight. So we'd like to start tonight with asking you to think about a day in the life, the emotional life of a child. So I'm going to invite you now to close your eyes if you'd like to. And if you don't feel comfortable doing that, that's fine too. Just turn your attention to yourself and think about how a child moves through his or her day emotionally. So I'm going to take you on a little bit of a journey. Imagine it's the morning. Your child is waking up, getting ready for school, having something to eat, breakfast with the family, going to school, transportation, bus, car, in a group, just with family, getting dropped off at school, entering the door, moving through the morning. Maybe there's a test today. Maybe he's just, or she's just, interacting with classmates and learning. Then lunchtime. And again in the afternoon, more schooling, more learning, perhaps a test, perhaps recess. In America, we have recess, where kids go outside and play. I'm sure you do as here as well. Your kid goes home at the end of the day. It's after school. What are the activities that your child is engaged in after school? Before dinner, then dinner with the family, and then in the evening with your family, maybe a story before bedtime, maybe friends, maybe playing, maybe family. Imagining all of that in your mind's eye, with the paper and pencil in front of you, please write down a list of what your child is feeling throughout the day. From morning till evening, what emotions is that child experiencing? So what does that list look like? What do you notice in your list? Would anyone like to share what you notice? It's a mix. Is that what you said, sir? It's a mix of feelings.
Ups
Up
and
and
downs.
down.
Ebb and
Ebb and
flows.
flow.
How many of you saw a little bit of a roller coaster ride? Everybody's like,
So what we know about our children's emotions every day is that it's much like a roller coaster. Ebbs and flows, ups and downs. And it's that way with all of us. And it's not the idea that we have a lot of emotions that we're here to talk to you about tonight. It's the idea based on years of science and practice and observation that we know that it's what you do about your emotions and with your emotions that determines your success in relationships, in the workplace, and for your children in school. So how you know about your emotions, how you understand them, and how you manage them. That's what we want to talk to you about today. So why are we here with you tonight? We're here because we all love our children. Everyone in this audience is here because there's either your own child you're committed to, or a child in your mind you're thinking about, or children in general. No matter where we are on the globe, we love and cherish our children. We want them to be their best. We want to give them the tools that will help them to solve problems in their lives and negotiate and navigate their lives as best as possible. And we, as parents and educators, want to be that best person, to be the teacher of those skills, the first teacher of those skills that we can be. The second reason we're here is the world is changing. We live in an age of technology. Things are happening very rapidly, and the issues that kids have to deal with are much more complex today than they were 10 years ago. There's competing demands and a lot of pressure on the lives of our children as they're growing up. And the skills that we give them will allow them to deal with those complexities and those changes and challenges successfully or less successfully. So we want to give them the best that we can give them. And the third reason is that we have discovered through science and practice that there are a set of skills that can help our kids negotiate their world in a more effective way.
So, as you can see here, one of the questions we have for you is, through the introduction that Robin gave you, how much training do you believe that parents in general get on the power of emotions in parenting? Not a lot. In general, not very much. What about the concrete tools that we all need and want to help teach emotional intelligence? Zero. Then we have a purpose. So we're here to talk to you about that. So as you can see up on the screen, the historical view of emotion and in relation to cognition or academic performance for children is not a very positive one. As a matter of fact, on our way here from, we live in Connecticut, we were taking a car to the airport. The driver of the car asked us, "What do you do and where are you going?" And we said, "We study this idea called emotional intelligence." And he looked at us through the rear view mirror of the car and said, "Emotional intelligence? That sounds like an oxymoron." And the truth is, for many people, it is an oxymoron. How can you be intelligent about your emotions when your emotions are disruptive? Even ancient philosophers would say things like, "Rule your feelings or they'll rule you." Yet, today, there is a much more optimistic view of emotion. What we know is 5 things that are critical, and this is all based in science. The first is that our emotions drive our attention, our memory, and our learning. So for example, if you're feeling bored right now, which I hope you're not, but if you are, likely your brain is somewhere else. You're making a list of what you should be doing tonight, you're thinking about the weekend, you're thinking about everything else than what we're talking about, because your emotions are what are driving your interest and your attention. Just like for a child who may be being bullied in school or who is anxious about a test, when their brains are filled with unpleasant, strong emotions, what happens oftentimes is that they can't focus in school. They can't learn. It's just the way the brain works. When your resources are depleted because of stressors in your life, it makes it hard to concentrate and focus. The second is decision making and judgment. So I have a question for all of you. How many of you have made a bad decision? Anyone? How many of you have made multiple bad decisions? Yeah. How many would you like some help? So what we know is that emotions drive much of our decision making. By way of example, the research that we do in our center often looks at teachers' emotions in relation to how they grade their students' work. And lo and behold, what we find is that emotions drive much of the way teachers think about their students and the grades they give them on their papers. The interesting thing about this research is that when we interview teachers after the experiments we run, 90% of them say there's no way that my feeling would influence my grading of this student, but yet it actually did. So what that tells us is that our emotions are affecting our thinking and judgment, but we're not really highly aware of it. The third is relationships. I'm curious, does anyone here know someone who expresses a lot of anger. Anyone know anybody like that? Like they're kind of disgruntled and irritable all the time. Some of you are thinking that might be yourself. We all know someone like that, most likely. And the question I have for you is, when you're thinking about going out for a cup of coffee, is that the person you think of going with? Not usually. We tend to not want to be around people who display a lot of negative emotions. The fourth is mental and physical health. We know that emotion regulation, for example, is critical to our well-being. If we can't manage our unpleasant emotions, like anxiety and depression, then of course that leads to mental illness. And finally, what we know is that emotions drive much of our everyday effectiveness. Now, what we've done at our center is taken all this information and try to make it accessible for people like yourselves. How do you take this concept of emotional intelligence into consideration in the simplest form? So what we've decided, and what we've done from our research, is broken emotional intelligence down into 5 skills. And what Rob and I are going to do with you today is really break down those skills and talk through them in terms of their role and importance in parenting. The first is recognizing emotions. So I'm looking at all of you, even with the light up here, trying to gauge how you're feeling. It's information. By the look of some of your facial expressions, I'm getting a little worried. Just kidding. But in all seriousness, you look at people's faces and it tells you something. Things are going well, things are not going well. Understanding where these emotions come from, putting the right words to them, labeling, knowing how to express emotions, and then finally the regulation. So here we go. First skill, recognizing emotions. This has to do with how we perceive or interpret emotions using different modalities. The first is the face, the second is the body, the third is the voice, and the fourth is our own physiology. Now, of course, that could be a whole semester of information. But what we're going to try to do tonight is take you through one of these skills of that reading emotions in faces. So I'd like you to take a moment in your seats and look at this young girl's facial expression. Take just a few seconds and jot down what's the first emotion that comes to mind for how she's feeling. Go ahead. Okay, we can now, everyone, we have fear, sadness. Raise your hand, please. Fear, sadness, frustration. Anything else? Surprise, fear, sadness, frustration, surprise. Those are all the same feeling, correct? Fear, sadness, frustration, surprise. Those are very different, aren't they? So we all look at the same face, but yet somehow or another we're attributing different emotions to it. So what does this mean?
What does this have to do with the way we parent our children? I'd like you to think for the moment about why it's important, or why it would be important for you to notice the tone of voice your child is using, the facial expression he or she has, and what his body language looks like. So turn to the person next to you, if you will, for a few minutes and think about it together. Why is it important to be able to read facial cues, body language, tone of voice, posture for your child? So what are you thinking about the reason that it's important for parents to read their children's facial cues? Yes, please.
So you know how to respond appropriately?
Exactly. Someone else. Thank you.
Because sometimes our children, they don't even know what they are feeling, so we have to help them to identify that emotion inside themselves.
Exactly, another really good point. So we know that it's a basic human need to be seen and understood. And when we're looking at our children's faces and they're expressing feelings, it's important for us to understand what they're expressing so we know what to do next, how to respond, how to help them. Or in the case of a child who can't express their feelings other than on their face, we can teach them how to express their feelings by reading those cues ourselves and interpreting and being their first teacher. And why might it be important for you as parents, for us as parents, to recognize our own feelings? Turn to your neighbor again. One more minute. Why is it important to recognize your own feelings? Ideas about that? As parents, as educators, as caretakers, why is it important for us to know what we feel?
To manage and regulate emotions.
To manage and regulate our emotions. Right, so recognizing your emotions is the first step. It's the foundational skill. And before you can make decisions about how you act on your emotions and whether you're going to move forward or pull away or reach out, you need to know what you're feeling.
The second skill of emotional intelligence is the understanding of emotion. And this is where it gets really interesting and also kind of complex, because what we want to do here is think about how are the cause of our emotion. Why are we feeling the way we're feeling? And also, what are the consequences of those feelings in terms of many things? For example, the way we're thinking, the judgments we're making, the decisions we're making, or even our everyday behavior. Emotions also have themes. So I'm going to ask all of you to think about this for a moment. What is the general theme around anger? Like, why do we feel angry? Take a moment, just think about that for just a few seconds. Why do people get angry? What's the reason behind anger? Who feels confident? Who says, I got it? You got it. All right, sir. So when your expectations are not met. Okay, thank you. Other thoughts about why we feel angry? Yes. We're going to try to use our...
Sorry. Loss of power.
A loss of power.
Dissatisfaction.
Dissatisfaction. A loss of power, dissatisfaction, or expectations aren't being met. Those are all the same things too, right? No, they're very different. So let's try one more. Anyone else want to try it? Let's go for 4. So the reason we feel angry.
Personally, it's usually when someone is doing something which is not in line with my values.
Okay, so when someone's doing something that's not aligned with your values.
Yes.
What we know from our research is that the feeling of anger generally comes from the theme of unfairness or injustice. When we perceive something as being unfair, we feel angry. When we see it as an injustice, we feel angry. The expectations not being met often results in disappointment. So what we're learning is that emotions have these underlying causes, and that's pretty critical to our work on emotional intelligence.
Also pretty critical for us as parents to know the causes of our child's feeling. And why would that be? So for example, if your child is very anxious, there's a big difference between whether or not that anxiety is due to an exam coming up, or whether the anxiety is due to a friend's birthday party that he wasn't invited to, right? So big difference. Understanding the causes of emotions has what impact on your ability to help? A positive one, of course. Right? If you know what the cause of your child's anxiety is, you can help them problem solve. If you don't know, then you're at a dead end of sorts. And what about then the consequences? Understanding the consequences of your emotions. For example, I know when I'm irritable, it's not the best time for me to sit down and try to problem solve with my children about what their summer plans are. If I'm irritable, I might want to take a moment and just be by myself or call a friend until I'm feeling a little better. So that I've become aware in recognizing and understanding my own emotions that there are consequences to each one of them. And I'm sure that that's true for each one of you.
So recognizing, paying attention to others, paying attention to self, understanding where is it coming from, what might be the consequences. And now we're going into the more nuanced component, which is the labeling of emotion. What is that exact word or that exact feeling that you are experiencing? Because we know there are differences among these words. Like disappointment is different than anger. We're going to try a little game here tonight. What I'd like you to do with a friend or a family member is take a minute and think about the difference between two emotions that people confuse a lot. And those emotions are jealousy and envy. What is the difference? Take a moment and think about that or talk with someone about it. So who feels confident? Who can tell me, who can share with us the difference between jealousy and envy? Please raise your hand. No one is confident. Who's a risk taker in the room? Yes.
I think of jealousy as having a negative connotation.
Jealousy has a negative connotation.
Yeah, I think of envy. If I'm envious of somebody, I don't know how to put it into words other than that it's a positive feeling. I think that somebody either has a way about them or something that I aspire to almost. Whereas jealousy, I don't think of it in positive framework. I think of
Jealousy, negative. Envy is something that perhaps you might aspire to be like or to have or something.
Right.
Thank you. Any other thoughts? Anybody have a different perspective? By the way, we call this the audience participation part. So let's try it again. One more person willing to take a risk. Yes, back there, sir. Jealousy is irrational. Envy is more rational? Okay. So let me tell you what the psychological difference is between the two. What we know is that envy is very much what you were saying, is that you may, visit someone's home and be envious of their artwork. But you don't dislike them for having it. You're envious that they may have it. A child may be envious of another student's grades or another student's progress in school. Jealousy, on the other hand, is a more complex feeling because the theme around jealousy is the fear of losing someone important to you. So jealousy is a relationship-driven emotion. Think about this in the classroom or at home. How many of you have children? Raise your hand. That's why you're here. How many of you have more than one child? How many of you who don't even have to admit it, but just think about this for a second, have given more attention to one of your children than another one of your children? And how many of you have noticed that the other child doesn't like it? So that's the jealousy experience, when that other child is looking at your relationship with your other child and saying, wow, there's something that this person, that mommy and the other child have that maybe I don't have. How many of you believe, just by raise of hands, that the way we would help a child regulate these two feelings would be different? That the strategies that we'd use to help a child manage his or her envy would be different than the strategies to help the child manage his or her jealousy. Yeah, relationships versus objects.
So communication and labeling our emotions is really essential and groundwork for any successful relationship. Think about it. We weren't born with an emotional vocabulary, but hopefully, developmentally, as we grow up, we're learning more and more words to be that nuanced communicator. I want you to think about your own home for a moment. What kinds of feelings do you typically communicate in your home? Are they positive feelings? Or are they negative feelings? What kinds of feelings? Just think about that for yourself. And do you think that you're effective at those nuanced differences between, for example, letting your child know when you're frustrated or when you're irritated? Teaching your child the difference between sadness, loneliness. Teaching your child the difference and expressing your difference between pride and happiness. How many of you feel that you're very effective at discriminating one feeling from another at home and communicating that? No one. Few people.
There's
How
hope, just so you know.
How many of you would like to be better at that? We can always work on those skills. And as Mark said, there's hope.
So that's the labeling of emotion. And as Robin was mentioning just now with all of you as parents, thinking about the difference between feeling sort of uneasy when your child is just mildly nervous versus anxious versus panicking. Critical, both for yourself and for your child. You have a question?
It's interesting how you deal with your emotions at home and at work. At work, you can be very proficient, but when you get home, you could be totally dysfunctional. The same situations. I know at school, you could say to a child, "I'm really angry right now. If I say something, I'm going to walk away before I say something that's going to hurt both of us." But at home, you probably wouldn't say the same thing.
Or perhaps maybe because at work you get paid to be there, you have to be quiet about your feelings.
But you should be able to transfer those skills.
But at home, you can sort of let it go.
But you're bringing up a really interesting point that perhaps we'll have time to talk more about later. Our homes are our cultures, right? And each one of us is raised in a different culture, and each culture has its own rules about what to say, how to say it, when to say it. Thank you for your comment.
Look up here. You can see that there are just dozens and dozens of words. Actually, in English, there are 2,000 words in the English language dictionary to describe our emotions. But yet, how many of us use more than 2 or 3 on a daily basis? If I say, "How are you feeling?" I'm going to ask you, "How are you feeling?" Give me your general response. "So, how are you feeling?" Some of you didn't say anything. That's part of our lives, right? Fine, okay. In New York, people say things like this. They don't even speak, or whatever. The next skill of emotional intelligence is the expression of emotion. This has to do with our own comfort level expressing the full range of emotions. For example, I always share that, I don't like conflict. Does anyone here like conflict? How many of you like, "I love conflict"? If you're a lawyer, you might like conflict. As someone who runs a center with about 25 employees, I tend to avoid conflict. It's like the worst thing I want to deal with. And, it can have repercussions, right? When there's something going wrong, you have to be able to deal with it. And if you're uncomfortable with that experience or that feeling, you may let things go and go and go and go and go. If you as a parent are uncomfortable talking about your sad feelings or your angry feelings, there are repercussions. This component of emotional intelligence also has a lot to do with culture. There are rules about emotions in different cultures. So by way of example, my other career, besides being a psychologist, is a martial arts instructor. I know you can tell, but anyhow. The martial art that I teach is a Korean one, and it's called Hapkido. And when I've traveled to Korea many times, the rules in Korea are just different than the rules where I lived in New York City. It's just a different, bowing is typical. Nobody bows to me in New York City. Eye contact is different. So we're, in New York City, everything's direct and strong focused. In Korea, it's more an eye gaze to the side. Doesn't mean that you're disrespectful or deferent. It just means something different. And one thing that we want to do, especially here in Abu Dhabi, where we have many cultures working together, is not make assumptions, but know that there are different cultural rules around emotion.
was saying, when you're expressing an emotion at home, you're teaching your child about whether or not he or she will be comfortable expressing an emotion. Saying that in a different way. The more comfortable you are, the more comfortable your child will be. And that's one aspect of expressing emotions. The other aspect of expressing emotions has to do with expressing your emotion at the right time, to the right degree, to the right person. So for example, in my clinical practice, I treated a mother and a daughter who came to me because the mother was afraid of expressing her fear of the child's independence to her daughter. So instead, what she would do is when the daughter went out with friends, she would yell at her and tell her that she had no business going out and she was disrupting the family life. So the mother in this case was uncomfortable expressing her own anxiety, uncomfortable expressing her own fear. And as she became more comfortable, she was then able to express more accurately at the right time and in the right degree to her daughter about the way she felt about her independence. So I'd like you to think for a moment about the feelings that you're comfortable expressing at home, related to what we were saying a few minutes ago about communicating. So how can you communicate something if you're not comfortable with it? What are the feelings that you're comfortable expressing? What are the feelings that you're not comfortable expressing at home, at work? Think about it and turn to your neighbor. Talk about that for a minute, please. Would anybody like to share something of their own experience with emotions? What you're comfortable with, what you're not comfortable with? Deb, did I see your hand up? Thank you.
Right over here. Oh, well, there first, and then here.
Sorry, can I derail for 30 seconds, please?
Sure.
When you say child, what age group are you talking of? Is it the UNICEF child? Is it the legal child up to 18? Just for me to understand, when you say child.
You're a child at any age. You're expressing your feelings from the time you're holding your baby in your arms.
Yeah, but I mean, every thing you said so far, you said your child, your child. What age group, what age level are you talking of? Because legally, the child is up to 18. UNICEF is something different. Are we talking of your own children, no matter what age are they?
Like Robin
Or
said,
what?
like Robin said, it's any age. So on our way here,
Okay.
Robin was talking to her 26-year-old son, expressing her excitement about giving this presentation.
Yeah. Okay.
And I sat there sort of like this, quiet, and so it's about your comfort level with anyone, really.
So
What-
not child as a child.
Not
It's
a
an-
little child, no.
Either or.
The example that I gave, if you're asking about the mother and the daughter, the daughter was a senior in high school, at her highest level in high school, teenager.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
I just want to add to that, which is, in many of the parents, with many of the parents that we work with, even as young as kindergarten, a father will sometimes come up to us and say something like, I'm not comfortable letting my child ever see me be sad. I don't want my child to ever think that I'm sad. So there's variability. Some parents, some men say, it's okay, I have to be real and authentic. My child's going to probably see it anyway. Other people just don't want to go there.
When I was growing up, my parents were excellent at expressing expectations and excellent at giving orders and expressing negative emotions. It's one of the reasons I became a psychologist. And I decided then that when I became a mom, I would do my best to daily express positive emotions and lots of love to my children, so much so that my kids are both very, very apt to say to me on any given day, okay, Mom, it's enough love, enough expressing.
And her colleague as well, sometimes in the car thinking, if you say I love you one more time to your son or daughter, I'm just going to lose it. So the next skill of emotional intelligence is regulating emotion. How many of you feel like your parenting would be easier if your children were more skilled at regulating their emotions? Yeah, I think a lot of us feel like this is the most critical skill of emotional intelligence, that management of emotions. When we think about emotion regulation, we think about it from a rich perspective, a wide perspective. Sometimes we have to prevent unwanted feelings. So for example, if you're going to take a test in school as a child and you know that you may be feeling anxious, what can you do in advance to help you not feel anxious in a situation? We also have to learn how to reduce those feelings that come at us like that. So all of a sudden you're feeling tremendous fear or anger, or even a lot of excitement about something, but you can't feel that because you have to focus on something. How do you bring the emotion down? As presenters, Rob and I often talk about the importance of initiating emotions. How do you create an emotion in a room when it's necessary? So shifting people from feeling low energy to lots of energy. Another component of emotion regulation, which is kind of interesting, is the maintenance of emotion. I'm just curious, has anyone here ever had a good day? Okay, it's okay to have a good day, just so you know. How many of you have ever had a good day and then somebody sort of like chips away at it? Do you know what I mean by that? Like, I always joke because I like to work in coffee shops. And my brother, who is in the medical field, often calls me at lunchtime or something. I say, hey, Mark, how you doing? And I say, fine. He goes, well, are you working? I said, yeah. He's like, well, I hear those noises in the background. And I say, well, yeah, I'm working in a coffee shop. You're working in a coffee shop? So the university pays you to sit in coffee shops. I said, yeah, actually, they do. It's like have that freedom as a professor. So you're telling me that you get paid to just sit around drinking coffee all day. Now, this may seem weird to you, but it's where I really get pleasure. I like to sort of sit with the music around and people watching and write. But nevertheless, after that phone call, I don't feel so great. I sort of drop my energy down. And the question is, how do I go back to that place where I was? So this is why emotion regulation is so important, because sometimes we want to prevent, sometimes we want to reduce, sometimes we want to create, sometimes we want to maintain, and other times we need to enhance the emotions.
As Mark said, this is a master skill for parents, emotional regulation. And one of the reasons that it's so critical is in order to handle any emotion that your child is having where you want to help him or her calm down, in order to have any difficult conversation or important conversation, it's vital that you manage your own emotions first. Mark and I talk a lot with families about how and what to do and where to do it. When you are wanting to have that tough conversation with your kid, taking a deep breath, finding a comfortable place where the two of you can have a conversation, all in the service of managing your own emotions as well as helping your child then watching you managing his or her emotions. So the child that goes upstairs and slams the door when he's out of control likely learned that from somewhere, right? And if it isn't the exact behavior that he learned by watching you, it was the lack of emotional expression effectively managed that he might have learned. So we're all works in progress. Learning emotional intelligence is the work of a lifetime. And while we're experts in emotional intelligence, you're the experts in your own children. You're the experts in your own family. So the way you learn to manage your emotions is going to be contagious. Your children are watching you.
So we've just gone through these ruler skills. First one, recognizing emotion, picking up on the cues in oneself and others. Second skill, understanding where is this feeling coming from? Why am I having this feeling? What are the implications? What are the outcomes? Labeling emotion, putting the right words to it. Expressing emotions comfortably, the full range of emotions, hopefully. And finally, as we just spoke, the regulation of emotion. What do we do with our emotions to manage them effectively?
We left Deb hanging with expression of emotion, and since it's so closely tied to regulating, I wanted to get back and ask you if you wanted to share something about expressing or regulating.
Me, the trouble comes with, regulating my own emotions when things are not going, well, and when I'm frustrated that they're not listening, or they're not doing something the 10th time that I've asked them to do it, or I'm just upset about something and I don't even realize that I'm taking it out on them, and expecting something from them that they can't give me because they don't even know why I'm upset. So I think for the positive stuff, for me, comes pretty easily, but learning how to regulate the negative stuff, and it's exactly what you said. Like, I do have a kid that slams doors and stomps her feet, so, I know where she learned it from, but I want to help her unlearn it, right? I mean, I need to unlearn it so that she can unlearn it.
Well, a little compassion for yourself will go a long way. I mean, and that's true for all of us. Parenting is really quite a challenge, and it's a wonderful challenge, but we need to have compassion for ourselves. And we're going to teach you a tool just in a couple of minutes that should help with regulating.
So over the last few decades, our center at Yale has done quite a lot of research on the relationship between emotional intelligence and important life outcomes for children, adults, even people in the workplace. Obviously, tonight, our focus is on what does it mean to be an emotionally intelligent child. And as you can see up front, and Robin will take you through this, the outcomes associated with higher emotional intelligence are pretty important.
Children who are high in emotional intelligence have less anxiety. It makes sense. They can manage their feelings. Children who have high emotional intelligence are less likely to abuse drugs and alcohol. They're less likely to become socially inappropriate in a deviant way. Children who have high emotional intelligence have less depression. Of course, again, because they can express their emotions and better regulate, more effectively regulate. And on the positive side, children who have high emotional intelligence, who have mastered these skills, they're our leaders. In fact, we're all raising the leaders in the next generation, right? Very important. Children who are high in emotional intelligence perform better academically. And that goes back to what Mark said earlier when describing why emotions matter. Emotions matter because they impact our attention and memory, decision-making, and our ability to learn. So when you've mastered these skills, it just makes sense that you would have higher grades. And what goes along with that is that children who are high in emotional intelligence are less hyperactive, less agitated in the classroom, less distracted in the classroom, and have a greater ability to pay attention.
So what does this mean for all of you? Well, it means there is hope. One of the things that we've done this year is moved from being a laboratory and just doing rigorous science around the value and importance of emotions and building tests of emotional intelligence to really going to scale with programming for school systems and families. So we've developed a program that we call Ruler, go figure. Ruler is teaching these 5 critical skills of emotional intelligence. And our center, which we call the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, has a mission, and that's just to use the power of emotions to help make the world a more effective, compassionate, and caring place. People ask us all the time, though, can you really learn this stuff? Are you sure? Because I just think that I was born this way. And there are parts of us that were born that way. There is that nature piece of emotional intelligence. There is our temperament, sort of the way we react to things. Some of us are very reactive. Some of us are less reactive in our nature. Some of us are worriers. Some of us are not worriers. I am a worrier. I worry about why I worry, and I even worry about why I worry about why I worry. I was just born that way. Luckily, however, I have skills now. So when I start getting obsessive and I start worrying, I say, wait a minute, are you really worried? Are you anxious? Are you anxious? No, you're nervous. No, are you overwhelmed? I start trying to pay attention of what is that real feeling. Where's it coming from? Oh, it's just your genetics. Let it go. Then I try to think about how I want to express that feeling. How do I want to regulate it? What's my strategy for managing it? So for example, if I'm nervous about a meeting that I'm going into in my office and I feel that sort of jitteriness in my stomach and the heart racing, when I open the door, I just stop and I take a break and I ask myself these questions about emotional intelligence. The second component is nature. All of us were raised by somebody who had potentially high emotional intelligence or someone who maybe was not so emotionally intelligent. And what we've learned, as Robin mentioned throughout this presentation, is what we've seen. So if our parents never spoke about emotions, guess what? You're probably not going to have the best emotion vocabulary. If our parents modeled ineffective ways of managing their emotions, guess what? You're probably going to have learned those strategies not even consciously.
We invite you now to take a moment and think about your own childhood. Think about the home you grew up in. And for some of you, this may bring up some uncomfortable feelings. But we're going to ask you just to notice and stay with it. What were the lessons that you learned about emotions and about handling your emotions from your parents? Both from watching them, because they're your first role model, and through their direct teaching. What were the lessons you learned about emotions in your family? And if you care to, please turn to the person next to you. And if you'd like to share your emotional lessons from your family, feel free to do that. And if not, share with your neighbor what it was like to do this exercise. What did it feel like to go back to your childhood and think about the emotions that you saw displayed and the lessons you learned? Just take a moment to do that, please. So, if you will, please, would you share with us what it was like to do this exercise? What did it feel like to go back and look at your family of origin and think about those emotional lessons? What was that like for you?
So a little bit unpleasant.
Unpleasant. And can I ask if that had to do with the fact that you didn't get very many lessons? Or the lessons that you got were unpleasant lessons?
How much was how much expression was acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm here talking to my husband, and ironically or surprisingly, his situation is complete opposite to mine. So where I saw my parents argue, he never saw his parents argue. Where I had I thought of emotions as a kid. I was depressed. He's like, no, we were happy. So it's very
So he
interesting.
became your therapist. It's good.
So two different cultures, two different families, two different cultures, two different sets of rules about how to express emotions. And what was the impact of that on your creating your family?
Do you know, I make a big effort to make sure that my son expresses his feelings to me. He's only 4, but my approach is so 180 degrees different than how my parents were with me. They did not, they're great people, but they never really took into consideration how deep or how much emotions there were. So with my son, it's like, why are you upset? What happened? That never really happened to me. It happened with him, my husband, lucky him. But it didn't happen with me. So like you were saying, your parents were different and you became more expressive. I feel there's an indirect lesson that happened with me. They didn't mean to teach me those skills, but I think because I didn't, as a grown adult now, I don't think they were the right skills. I want to kind of shift them a little bit.
Such an important point, because our parents are teaching us all the time, but they're not always intentional. And our job is to help you be intentional about using the power of your emotions and teaching the power of emotions to your children, so that in 20 years, when your son is sitting here and he remembers back to his childhood, he's going to have a lot of wonderful things to say about how you've encouraged his emotions.
You might say, enough with I love you, Mom.
He might.
Sir.
I have a question with what would you say there is a discussion about IQ versus EQ, about balancing the attention to, let's say, a child or a young person, so that they get attention to both, because the prevailing theme is like to push your child to achieve academically high, but they may not have enough time to develop their emotional intelligence. What would you say about the importance of balancing these two so that they grow up becoming very productive members of the society?
I think for openers, this is part of the message that we hope you're going to leave with, is that they're intricately tied together. That managing your emotional life allows you to be more cognitively able. When you can pay greater attention and make better decisions, you're better able to learn and better able to concentrate.
And just to add on to that, there's added value of being emotionally intelligent. So I'm very fortunate as someone who works at a great university, and my students are the smartest, the brightest crayons in the box. Yet I get students who oftentimes don't know how to navigate their emotional lives very effectively. Either they're very depressed because they put so much pressure on themselves that they lock themselves in a room and study and they crumble. Or they develop an invincibility kind of problem where I always joke that my students come up to me and say things like this: Professor Brackett, I've got a question, but I'm not sure you're going to know the answer. And then, of course, I have to remind them of the research I do on how emotions affect their teachers' grades. And they're not always appreciative of my research. But, that's something that has to be nurtured, because the world that we're moving into is a world of teamwork, of collaboration. And if children are not learning how to navigate the social and emotional space, no matter what their IQ is, they're not going to achieve their fullest potential.
And just to build on what Mark is saying as well about relationships, is that there's decades of research that people who have healthy and mutually respectful relationships have a greater sense of well-being in their life. And emotional intelligence is all about creating those terrific relationships.
Can I ask a question? Going back to your...
Where are you?
I'm over here, to your right. When you asked what do you think about when you think of your childhood, and it makes me smile, because my family was just an emotional roller coaster. I saw my parents argue. I saw them be very nice to each other. I'm Irish. We tend to express our emotions all of the time. What I look at, though, is I'm the youngest of three, and I would say my older brother is emotionally stunted, whereas my sister and I are more normal. And I just can't understand why, out of the same environment, the same nurture, same parents, we have turned out so completely different.
That's part of that genetic piece. I should just let you be aware, though, of some research that we've done, that people's self-evaluation of their emotional intelligence do not correlate with their actual emotional intelligence.
I tell my sister that the whole time.
Yeah.
So two things to add on to that. One is that personality. Everyone's born with a different personality and temperament. But also the home you grew up in, while you might have had the same parents, is not necessarily the same home, because what your parents were going through and living with in their emotional lives when your siblings were growing up is not necessarily the same, one after the other after the other. And the more children there are, the more emotional activity there is, right? So things get to be different the more children that come into play.
Essentially our goal, because you can't control your genetics, like written books on emotional intelligence, still that anxious person, although of course I've gotten more skills to deal with it. You can't control the environment that you were brought up in. There's nothing you can do about it. So our goal really is to make sure that every child, from preschool all the way to high school, gets that concrete, developmentally appropriate emotion education. And what we're going to move on to now for the wrap-up of our presentation are two tools that we've developed in our center to really help people develop their emotional intelligence. The first is called the mood meter. And the mood meter, as you can see up front, is a 4-color grid. And it has 2 axes. The first axis is pleasantness. The pleasantness axis has to do with what's going on for you right here in your mind. It's your subjective experience. It's your appraisal of how you're feeling. -5 would mean, for example, that right now you are at the most unpleasant place you've ever been. You're thinking to yourself, after being with Robin and me for an hour, like, you gotta be kidding me with this thing. You're like, honestly, I came out at 6 o'clock at night to hear 2 people from, New York talk about feelings. That's ridiculous. Hopefully none of you are there right now, but maybe some of you. That would be -5. +5 is like you don't even know. There are no words in your brain to describe how, you just like, there's a guy on the stage talking about feelings. This is amazing. Like, this is what I've been waiting for. And I can't wait to run home and just try this stuff out. Some of you, I'm not sure anyone's there yet, but you're between those 2 anchors, -5, +5. Try it right now. Where are you right now about this workshop on emotional intelligence for families? Are you a -5? Are you somewhere 0, neutral, +1, 2? Is this the best experience of your life? 5? You don't have to share. We don't really want to know. We actually do, otherwise we wouldn't have careers. The next axis is your energy axis. It's what's happening for you in your body. So all of us have a level of activation, a level of energy. -5, you are honestly about to fall asleep. Your energy factor is just so low that you're barely conscious. +5, you have so much energy you can't contain yourself. You just want to jump out of your seat and start teaching the mood meter to your family right now. You're just full of energy, you're just bursting. +5 energy, -5 energy. They cross, as you can see, to 4 quadrants: yellow, red, blue, green. Yellow, high energy and pleasant. Let's just do a quick yell out from the audience. What are some emotions in the yellow? Go. Nobody's in the yellow, I guess. Joy. Anyone? Excited, elated, happy, eager, motivated, inspired. Lots of pleasant emotions. Sunny. Let's go to the red. Now your energy is still high, but you're unpleasant. Just to give you a hint, the anxiety family is in this quadrant, as is the anger family. Some words there, just think about it to yourself. The teeniest bit of anger, maybe you're feeling peeved. A little bit more, maybe you're annoyed, then you're irritated, then you're angry, then you're livid, then you're enraged. How about the blue? Low energy and unpleasant. Tired. Want to go home. Say it again. Hopeless. Yes, so that's where you can go from being sad to disappointed to hopeless to feeling despair to being depressed. The green. Pleasant but low in energy. Patient, calm, relaxed, serene, content, tranquil, peaceful. So you can see there are lots of words. And what the mood meter helps us to do is teach these ruler skills. First, we identify how we're feeling. Then we start to think, why am I in the yellow right now? Oh, because I'm at a workshop on emotional intelligence. Yeah. I'm not only excited, I am ecstatic. And how am I going to regulate that? I'm going to go home and tell everybody about this. I'm going to make a mood meter and put it on our kitchen refrigerator. Robin always says, we're going to make mood meter shower curtains.
Placemat.
So you can see that just one tool can help teach all of these skills.
So how might you use the mood meter at home? Some ideas. Please.
Right here in front.
To just see where I am, I guess, to regulate my feelings and to just stop and see, okay, what I'm feeling now and how, to just monitor my feelings and my expression.
Exactly. So just to plot yourself, to notice that you're in the red or the yellow or the green or the blue. To then be able to check in, okay, so what can I do about that? If you don't feel comfortable with where you are and you want to shift to another quadrant. Another use of the mood meter at home.
This woman over here. Or back there.
You could use it for your children. You could bring it down to a basic level, maybe put a happy face, a sad face for your really young children. And then as they grow, you know, you can add the vocabulary. And then when the teenage years hit, oh, I'm glad I'm over those. You can use it to talk to your teen about how they're feeling and connect with them.
Yes, it's actually a wonderful way and non-threatening way to ask your child how you're feeling. So right now, there's little Marky, and little Marky is coming down to breakfast today, and we're going to give you an example of how we use the mood meter in our house. Marky, what's wrong, honey?
Nothing.
Oh, Marky, you look
What?
like your body is shaking.
Yeah,
And
I'm just cold.
Your body's shaking and your face looks very tense.
Mm-hmm.
Marky, what are you feeling?
I don't know. I'm just cold.
Well, let's look at the mood meter. Where do you think you are on the mood meter? Do you think you're in a sunny yellow place?
Mm-mm.
A green place,
Mm-mm.
feeling calm? A blue place, feeling sad?
Mm-mm.
No.
I
Maybe
think I'm in the red.
you think you're in the red. Yeah, I think you're in the red because your body's shaking. You look like you have a lot of intensity in your feeling. So what's causing that? Do you know?
Well, I'm kind of nervous about the test today.
You are. I know it makes sense. You're taking a test, so you're feeling nervous.
I don't
So-
think I'm going to do well.
So how about if we use a strategy to calm down first? Let's take a deep breath. Do it with me, okay? So I'd like you to breathe in to the count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Do it one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4. And breathe out. 2, 3, 4. So how does your body feel now, Mark?
A little better.
A little better, yeah. So when you calm down, now we can think together.
I'm still
about-
scared, though. I'm still scared about the
You're
test.
still scared, of course. It makes sense. You're taking a test. So what can you say to yourself when you're feeling scared going into school?
Well, I'm actually a pretty good student.
So you could maybe remind yourself as you're going into school that you're a good student. You know, Mommy does that too. When I'm nervous about something that I've done before, but I'm nervous anyway, I remind myself, you know what? I'm good at this. And last time I did pretty well at this. Do you think you could use that strategy? You're smiling now, so maybe you're not in the red so much anymore. What do you think?
I can do it. I'm going to try it.
Thank you. So what do you think? Think Marky is doing a little bit better? Okay. So a use of the mood meter. You notice what's happening for your child as he's walking into the room. Help your child to identify what he or she is feeling, and then work with your child through the understanding to perhaps the managing and the shifting into a different mode, into a different quadrant.
Some of you brought up these examples. There are endless uses of the mood meter. We could write a book called 1001 Ways to Use the Mood Meter. Just to give you examples, the first picture up there on the left is using it to teach children about facial expressions. What does a yellow emotion all the way on the top right look like versus a green emotion versus a blue and a red emotion? The second picture is building your mood meter wall. So when you go into schools that have adopted Ruler as a program, each classroom has a mood meter wall, and some of them have just the most amazing words all over the place. And in middle schools and high schools, they use metaphors for emotions and have different poems that evoke different feeling states. And in high schools, they talk about the neurotransmitters that are firing in each of these quadrants to get children to really understand how emotions are affecting their thinking and their judgments and their decision making. And on the right side, you can see what looks like an app, which it is. Rob and I this year partnered with an organization in the United States to build our Mood Meter app that will be released in about 1 month, so that you can plot yourself to your heart's delight. And what's nice about the Mood Meter app is that it records your feelings over the course of a day, week, or month, and then you get to look at your report and you start learning. Oh, wow, I spent 50% of my day in the blue. Yikes. What's going on? Let me figure out why and what I can do. The last thing we're going to share with you tonight is another tool, and we call that tool the meta moment. And the meta moment is a tool that Rob and I spend a lot of time working on to help people manage their very strong feelings. We often talk about emotional triggers. Do any of you have emotional triggers? To clarify, it's like somebody does something or says something that just hijacks you and makes you feel maybe anxious or angry. Give you an example. So when we do academic talks, Robin and I have a colleague, and we were at one presentation recently, and I was doing a talk like this, and I said, any questions? And this person raised her hand like that, and she goes, I have a question, but you know, I just want to let you know that a lot of us in the room would disagree with your theory. How many of you would be activated by that? Yeah, it's disrespectful. You know, my original thinking was, you know, a lot of us in the room, like you and your 30 personalities. But, you know, unfortunately, I run the Center for Emotional Intelligence, so I have to be my best self. And there are 6 steps to the meta moment. The first step is something happens. You are triggered by something real or imagined. The second step is that you notice that you've been triggered, and all of a sudden you see your thinking going in the wrong direction. You start saying those negative things to yourself. You've noticed that you're very tense in your body. You're maybe even clenching your fists or gritting your teeth. The third step is stop and breathe. What we've learned from our research is that we want to activate our parasympathetic nervous system when we're getting hijacked. Because when we activate that nervous system, it allows us to think more clearly and problem solve more effectively. Once we're hijacked and we're enraged, it's too late. Once we're panicking, too late. So you want to be able to regulate your feelings earlier in that process. The fourth piece is called see your best self. You know, I joke about this, but in all honesty, being the director of a center on emotional intelligence puts you in a very interesting place. You know, everybody's watching to wait for you to like be dysregulated. And so I've made it, you know, the promise to myself that what I have to do is think of myself as that sort of expert on emotion. And when I do that, somehow or another, I tend to use more effective strategies. So when I'm triggered, I say, Mark, emotional intelligence guy, where's the emotional intelligence guy? Let him out, where is he? Please come, please come, please come, please come. And somehow or another, it makes a difference. I have a new one, actually, because a few months ago I was in a little classroom in New York City, and this cute little 5-year-old girl was there, and when I walked in the room, she jumped out of her seat and she goes, the mood meter man is here! And so now I think of myself as the mood meter man, and it helps me. So what would the mood meter man do? And when the mood meter man is alive, he chooses more effective strategies. He tends to take the high road. He tends to use strategies that are helpful and pro-social as opposed to unhelpful. So now the question is,
So as parents and people who care for children, we all want to be our best self. We all aspire to be the most ideal of ourselves that we can be in that moment. And one of the other aspects of being your best self is to be mindful that the person, your child, your teenager or your little child, is watching you and forming an opinion of you. You have a reputation with your child. as either a dream squasher, for example, or a dream supporter. And I'm speaking from my own experience of having many moments with my daughter who wanted to travel quite a bit when she was young. And I was very excited for her until I realized that she wasn't intending that I was going to go with her. She was intending to go by herself. So as she would tell me about these proposed trips to study and to go to libraries to search out original resources, it would be very, very difficult for me, and I would have to do a lot of deep breathing and invoke an image of my best self as a mom, the mom who supported her dreams, and the mom who, when she looked back, she could say about her mom, gee, my mom she really supported me in everything I wanted to do. So that's part of your best self as a parent. And we have role-specific best selves. So you have a best self at work and a best self at home. Best self as a friend, a best self as a mom or dad. Take a moment now, and on the piece of paper in front of you, write down 5 adjectives, please, that describe your best self. 5 adjectives, the self you aspire to be in your most ideal form. Take a moment now, if you will, please, and turn to your neighbor and share any or all of your best self attributes. Who is your best self? Thank you. Would anyone like to call out one of your adjectives, your best self?
Say that again, please. Loving. Lovely.
Another.
Jovial.
Jovial. Fantastic.
Patient. Caring. Aspiring. Inspiring. Delightful. Passionate. Supportive.
Supportive.
Motivating. Creative. So we all aspire to be our best selves, but we often don't take the time to think about what that actually looks like. So for all the adjectives that you describe, when you leave tonight, we wish for you to think about the behaviors that you need to put into place, that you need to enact in order for people to see you being jovial, being patient, being motivating. Each one of these adjectives that you want to be as your best self has behaviors attached to it. And we wish for all of you that you take those with you tonight. Yes.
I was just wondering, how do you address emotional intelligence in societies where talking about emotions is considered weak?
It's a great question, and we've had the opportunity to travel to cultures where that is the case. And what we do with people who come from cultures like that is ask them questions, like, is that working for you? And oftentimes, for example, when we've gone to China, which early in millennia ago was an open culture, changed in more recent times, people start saying, well, our children are really stressed out, our children are depressed, we're not talking about feelings. I guess we need to bring that back into our culture. So it's really not judging it, but asking people that important question as to, is it working? Is it helping?
And it may be that there are places where talking about emotions in public would be considered not okay, but finding that trusted someone in private to share your emotions with could be a better decision. And remember also that emotional intelligence is not just about talking about your emotions. It's about effectively managing them. So that even in cultures where talking about them is not what there is to do, there's still plenty of room for growth and skill development to manage those emotions.
I mean, just by way of example, I moved from New York City to Connecticut, where I now work, and the rules about emotions are very different in Connecticut. It's a much more stoic society. So now in the hallway, it's like, good morning, right? Like, wait a minute, I haven't gotten a hug in 20 years. So there are rules everywhere, from New York to Connecticut, to the Middle East, to the Far East, to European countries. So it's time for us to wrap up. And what we want to say, or at least what I'll say, and then Robin will bring us through our final conversation, is that as academics, we don't like to make audacious claims. So while we believe that emotional intelligence is a critical skill, and we have the research to show that it really does make a difference in everybody's lives, we can't say, tonight you're going to go home and all of a sudden your whole family is going to be healthy, effective, compassionate. It takes time. It takes practice. This is a life skill. These skills will help your toddler manage his or her emotions effectively. It'll help your child who's in preschool get into kindergarten. It'll help your child in middle school when all those hormones come about and relationships and friendships change, to when you get into high school, to having to make a decision about college, to the future. It's a lifelong skills, and what we need at different time periods is just different. But our goal really is to make sure that we provide that critical foundation for children so they have those social and emotional skills they need to navigate their lives.
And we want to encourage you to have compassion for yourselves. It takes practice and practice and more practice. And we all have moments where, as much as we aspire to be emotionally intelligent, we're not. As much as we want to use those skills, we don't, deliberately, or we forget. And as parents, we are those role models, those powerful role models, those first teachers for our children. And the most effective way to use your power compassionately is to be skilled yourselves, so that you're in charge of your emotions, not having your emotions in charge of you, so that you can be deliberate about those messages that you're saying to your children and the kind conversations you're having about whatever topic may come up. So we thank you very much for your attention here tonight and your willingness to participate in some what might have been difficult moments for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So since we're about 7,000 miles away from our house, we'd like to take some questions, if you have any. Question over here. So we have one over here. We have a question in the back as well. So we'll start with the woman here in front.
Okay. First of all, thank you very much. I enjoyed it, really. I personally am here because I have a problem at home. I have a 17-year-old boy. And if somebody in the audience has a 17-year-old boy, you understand what I'm saying. He keeps saying he has an anger problem. He has an anger issue. He snaps. And as a mother and as an academic person, I'm a psycholinguist. When it comes to my son, I don't know what to do when these anger issues break up. So can you just give me a 1, 2, 3 to handle him? Thank you.
So we wish it were that easy as a 1, 2, 3. But I would say, and I did have a 17-year-old son, and I survived, and he's now 26. One thing that's really important is to remember to manage your emotions first. So that if your son is having an anger problem and you're upset about it, it's likely that you're activated quite a bit. And coming to a place inside of yourself where you can have that calm conversation and inviting your son to have a conversation with an observing ego so that you can both talk about it and problem solve together, perhaps is a good strategy. And we
Thank
can
you.
talk a little bit more about that after.
Thank
if
you.
you'd
I
like.
appreciate it. Thank you.
There was somebody in the back, yes.
I'm not sure. Okay. A lot of us back here have very young children, infants, or toddlers at this age. I understand that one of the things that we can do right now is just play a good role model in terms of how we express our emotions, etc. But what else can we do concretely? Maybe try and put words to their emotions and help them teach the difference. But if you have any other tips, that would be really helpful.
So one of the things that I think is really important, and we think is really important, is to say your strategies out loud. So not just teaching, so you know when, Marky, when you're upset, maybe you could take a deep breath, but showing him also that when I'm upset, I'm taking a deep breath. Because not only are you the teacher, but as we've said throughout the night, you're the first role model. And behavior is very powerful shaper. So kids are going to watch you, and they're going to do what you do. That's the first tip. The other thing that we talk about all the time for young kids is reading and using storybooks to say examples and to do teaching and to help your child notice recognizing emotions and asking questions about what those characters may be feeling and saying what you think those characters may be feeling. Movies, videos, watching alongside of your child. And just in those quiet moments, talking about feelings and making feelings conversations part of the culture of your family.
Yeah, I just want to add on is that you want to become sort of an emotion scientist at home. So when you're noticing an emotion in your child's facial expression, ask that question. Or say, you know, it looks like you're feeling this way. When you're feeling a certain way, don't just say, I'm angry, go to your room, or something like that, or I'm leaving. You want to explain very clearly, I'm disappointed because I expected this to happen and it didn't. I'm feeling angry because, I'm feeling excited because. And one thing to be mindful of is the expression of all emotions. So one thing that we want to leave you with today is that from the mood meter's perspective, or from our perspective, all emotions are valuable and important. Being in the red can be angry and anxious, but can also be determined and passionate. Being in the blue can be sad and lonely, but it can also be a way to demonstrate empathy. Being in the green, it can be calm, but someone who's in the green too much can sort of like, you know, little energy please. Someone who's in the yellow all the time can be overwhelming. So there's a positivity with excitement, but there's also being overwhelmed. And make sure that when you're talking to your children, you're not just, you know, dealing with managing their negative emotions, but noticing the positive ones too and talking about those as well. Up front.
Yeah, actually, I was going to ask you the questions whether there is good emotions or bad emotions. So
They're not.
they're not. Now, a second question is, once you help your child to identify his emotions, how can you also help your child? I think sometimes I have a child who doesn't show enough empathy to others. Can we teach empathy, or it's just natural, or can it become a skill?
So Robin and I will both have strong opinions, and the quick answer is yes. Demonstrating it is the most important thing. Remember, empathy is, at the outcome, is really based on these ruler skills. It's being able to read that person properly, understand where that feeling is coming from, express the feeling to the other, and also help that other person to manage those emotions. So by teaching these skills, what you're going to automatically be doing is helping your child build empathy.
I would agree, of course. And beyond that, your expression of empathy for people in your life, including your child, the more out loud you can be about that and the more nuanced you can be about noticing something in someone and having a strong feeling about as if you were that person, in other words, demonstrating empathy and demonstrating caring behavior that comes from feeling empathic, goes a long way towards teaching your child how to do it himself or herself.
One thing I just want to add on, this is not really about empathy, but it's about the congruence with which you teach emotional intelligence. So we always joke around, and when we're working with parents, when, you know, how many of you have done something like this? I need you to calm down. So you're really, it's not very congruent, right? Calm down. If I have to tell you one more time to calm down, I'm going to lose it. Guess what? You're not really teaching them how to calm down. So make sure that you're being, we need to think about this from a new perspective. And I want to go back to Deb's point a little earlier, which is that when you're
Can you
depleted...
hang on that for 1 second?
Sure.
Because I wanted to add on to the empathy. So Mark and I teach a course at Columbia University over the summer for principals who are people who are aspiring to be principals. These are people in their 20s and 30s. And typically, out of a class of 90, there'll be 2 or 3 people who say, I really need to work on my empathy skills. And often what we suggest that person does is go to a store and buy a stuffed animal, go into a store, look for a stuffed animal that calls out to him or her, and take it home and keep a journal as if the stuffed animal were writing in the journal. People very often look at us like we're crazy when we suggest that. But if you teach someone to begin to think deliberately from someone else's perspective, it's an empathy builder. Just one strategy.
And what I was just going to say in response to that earlier comment is that it's hard to be empathic. It's hard to help your child manage his or her anger when your resources are depleted. That meta moment, that best self, is so critical when you are at your worst. Because what happens, you've been stressed out from work, you're tired, maybe something's not going right in your life, and that's when you go for those automatic, habitual ways of dealing with your emotions. And what we're urging you to do is pause, spread that space and time between your trigger and your response, and activate that best self, because that best self is going to guide you towards a more effective strategy.
And just adding to that, in the role play that Mark and I did just a few minutes ago, if I had been completely stressed out as a parent, seeing my child come downstairs very agitated and very frightened, I would not have been able to help him effectively manage that situation. So in this role play, I didn't play a mother who was completely stressed out herself, having to manage first. But in real life, it often happens. Certainly it's happened to me many times in raising my children that their anxiety has triggered me, and I needed to calm down before I could help my child effectively problem solve.
So I think it's getting late, and maybe some of you are starting
We
to
have one more question.
drop your energy on the mood meter.
There's a question.
We'll take one more question.
Raising awareness and intelligence, and we know that 1 hour and a half is not enough to go deeper. So could you suggest a book, for example, or website, especially in relating to emotional intelligence and parenting?
What we recommend is go to our website, which is, because we have a lot of resources there, and we're going to be building more and more resources for families. And the website is just EI, as in emotional intelligence. It's up here on the screen, .yale.edu. And Dr. Stern has tons of books that she can share with you. But I know that it's getting late, and I really want us to wrap up so we can let you all get home to your families to practice using the mood meter in the meta moment. So on behalf of both of us, thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you very much.